right, welcome to the Unprofessionals podcast. I am back with Nathan Page and Jonny Day, and we are here to talk about a little bit of football. The college football playoff wrapped up this past week, and the NFL playoffs are happening this weekend. Specifically, we want to talk about the college football game and how Alabama's reign has impacted college football as a whole, and Clemson almost not Clemsoning themselves, which I guess they didn't really Clemson themselves because they played a really good game, honestly, and didn't completely screw up like Clemson often does. So I would say by definition, Clemson themselves.
What? Yeah, by definition, a Clemsoning can't happen in a national championship game because technically a Clemsoning would be like they beat Florida State by like 20, and then the next week they lose to Duke.
Right. Mm-hmm. Or it could be the Clemsoning of all Clemsoning. Like they could have gone 14-0 and just got smashed.
That's true.
The championship. And that could be the Clemsoning of all Clemsoning.
Good point.
But if we're diving in, I will just go ahead and give a shout that when you look at the points Alabama scored, okay, they scored, 45 points?
Yeah.
So I'm going to walk through, I think, 4 of their touchdowns. They had a 95-yard kick return, big play. They had a 50-yard run by Derrick Henry in which I don't know what happened to the secondary on that play because if you watch the replay, he gets through the line of scrimmage and there's no one.
Yep.
So that's the 50-yard run. Then they had like 2 or 3 – they had 2 50-plus yard passes for touchdowns. Then at the end of the game when they scored another touchdown, they had like an 80-yard pass that got them down to like the 5-yard line. If you take away those big plays, I mean, that's a totally different ballgame. But I think, and I threw out on Twitter that night, I think Clemson was the better team, but Alabama was more experienced. Like they knew if we just don't make big mistakes, we're going to win the ball game.
Yep.
And I think we talked about that a little bit before, Nathan. But
yeah, and that's what it came down to. I mean, like Clemson, they made a couple of mistakes, and it seemed like they were outplaying Alabama, but they made those mistakes, and Alabama knew how to capitalize on them. And Saban pulled out the onside kick at the right time.
Yeah, that was
so I mean they did everything. Alabama literally played the perfect game. And Clemson looked better. Like I think you play that game 10 times, Clemson might win 6 based on like based on how well they were playing. I mean maybe even more than that. But based on experience, not that Alabama is like not a talented team. They just didn't – to me, they didn't look as fast. They didn't look like their scheme was as good. But they just knew what to do, and they capitalized on every mistake.
Right, and I think it goes unnoticed because it happened so many times this season. But Derrick Henry, how many yards did he have? Like 170 or 150 plus or something like that?
Yep.
I mean, that dude – as much as we want to say he might not be good in the NFL, which he might not. No, there's nobody who's guaranteed an NFL career, but I think that dude is set up for success just the way he's built.
Yeah.
If he can stay lean and actually work hard. But, you know, some of these guys go into the combine and they're 15 pounds overweight and they run a 4.6, and you're thinking, what happened to the guy that just won the Heisman Trophy?
Yeah.
So, I mean, anything could happen, but that dude is a monster.
Oh, he's like LeBron in that he's confusing to watch move because he's so huge. He shouldn't be able to move that fast. But he outruns cornerbacks, and he's 6'3", 240. I don't know. It's interesting. I hope he does well. And he is one of those guys where you watch the game and you know he's making an impact, but at the end of the game you see, oh, he's got 200 yards. Like I didn't realize. Yeah, and that's how smooth he is. You know, it's just he's not one of those guys that you don't see. It doesn't stand out on the screen, but he was a workhorse. So
absolutely, Josh, you had some thoughts on the Alabama reign in college football.
One of the great things about sports to me is the rise and fall of the great. Specifically, I guess you could point to a team like Chelsea this year who just won the Premier League last year, and this year they're fighting relegation. I just feel like with Alabama, that's just not going to happen while Nick Saban's there. And granted, he's not going to be there forever, so perhaps when he leaves, which is often the case with most powerhouses, when the great coach leaves, the program falters a bit. But it's not as interesting to me when the same great team is great year after year after year and never falters. And Alabama's definition of falter would be to lose 1 or 2 games, which isn't really faltering that much.
Well, and just to interject right there, they have lost to Ole Miss twice in 2 years. Just saying.
Yeah, and they still won the championship.
I know. I know. I love the. I don't mind. I'm not going to get on a rant. Anyways, continue. Sorry.
But it's less interesting to me when the same team wins 4 out of 7 championships. But it's not even like that could be interesting in a normal sports context, like when the Patriots do it. But it's just like they're going to keep doing it. There's no decline because it's not like their players are going to get old because they play 3 or 4 years and they're gone. Then they bring in the next 5-star recruit and they're great for another 4 years. Like Nick Saban could coach till he's 85 years old, keep doing the same thing, and Alabama could just keep being great because they have the standard there, and it's just not going to end while Nick Saban's still there. So it's just a little frustrating to me, and not as interesting as college football was when there's more than just basically Alabama who can win a national championship and
Absolutely.
guarantee every year.
And I will agree with you on the point that when you look at the teams that are ranked 5 through 10, they're just a tier down from the teams this year that were ranked 1 through 4. I think there was a couple other teams like that maybe could have made an argument for wanting to be in the playoff. And Ohio State's going to argue every year whether they lose 6 games or they lose all their games. They're going to say they should be in the playoff because, and they're Ohio State, and they won the national championship the year before. I feel like they're going to be able to say that every year because Urban Meyer is a good coach. So Ohio State's good. But when you look at these teams, like, it makes me upset to see Notre Dame in the top 10. I just will never believe that they're a top 10 team. It's just hard for me to swallow that. So when you look at that, I will say there's not a spread of power like there has been in the past. But Alabama does have a reign. But this year, who did they have that got experience that'll be playing next year? And that's something that's been a theme among the Alabama team is – since the Mark Ingram days, there's been Trent Richardson, Eddie Lacy, Derrick Henry, all these guys come along. And it's almost like there's a number 2 running back who's an underclassman who gets 20 to 25% of the carries and gets major experience for the next season. Well, this year there wasn't that. They had Kenyon Drake, and he's gone. And he was kind of the number 2 running back who also played receiver and some other positions. But then there was Derrick Henry, who obviously got the bulk of the carries, won the Heisman Trophy, and set a bunch of rushing records in the SEC. But when you look after those 2 guys, LP, I think who's next in line for running back. But when you look at it, man, they don't have a guy who got a bunch of experience this year. They don't have a quarterback who got a bunch of experience this year. They had a guy who battled for the job, but at the end of the day, I think their quarterback played pretty well. I know they've got a couple of linemen who were senior, like All-Americans, hopefully going to go in the first round of the draft. But when you look at that, I think they're losing a lot of experience this year, and they don't have the turnover that they've usually had. And they're getting Georgia's defensive coordinator. And as a Georgia fan, I can go ahead and say I'm sorry, Alabama fans.
Well, yeah, and Pruitt's going to come in there and be Saban's boy. Like, he'll do whatever Saban says. Because I think he worked under Saban way back early. Like, I guess 2008, 2009.
Yeah, he did. He coached DBs, I think.
Yeah. So, with Alabama and their reign, Bo Scarborough's coming back for them. I mean, they're going to be good next year. I'm trying to say this as objectively as I can. It's hard to sound objective when you say something this as a fan of the other team, but I really do see Ole Miss beating them again because they play in week 3. Ole Miss will have their identity figured out already. They're losing talent, but Ole Miss is kind of reloading with some younger players. Alabama is still going to be figuring out who's their quarterback, what's their identity, who are their go-to guys other than Calvin Ridley. So I can see them losing there. But, man, the thing that they do every year is they just get better every game. By the end of the year, they're one of the 10 best teams in the country. And it speaks to how good Saban is and how well he coaches his team, how patient he is, how experienced he is. And so it's like they have created this dynasty. It is almost a monopoly. And college football is set up capitalistically in that the rich get richer. If you're a good team, you're going to get good recruits and you're going to be good again. Very rarely is a team good one year and win a national title, and then 3 years later they're completely irrelevant unless the coach leaves. So yeah, it's an interesting way that college football is set up, and so I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. It just is what it is. And I would honestly argue, counter to your point, Josh, that right now college football is the least. I know that Alabama has a dynasty over the past 7 years. They've won 4 and 7, which has only happened when the Notre Dame did it in the 60s when there were no good teams. I would say that there's more.
I think they did it in the 40s during World War II.
Oh, was for real?
Yeah, so all the good athletes are overseas.
Yeah, that's true.
War, and they were winning championships.
Yeah.
if you can live with yourself.
Taking advantage of the military. No, but I would say that college football has the most parity that it's ever had. I would argue that because the TV money has spread out, teams like Oregon, Ole Miss, Baylor, TCU are rising up to be better than they've ever been in their history. You see better coaching all around. You see better athletes all around. Players realize they don't have to go to a powerhouse program to be on TV or to have a chance at the NFL. So I just think, in my opinion, it's Alabama, yes, has won 4 titles in 7 years. They are dominating the sport from a top-tier perspective. But it used to be let's say there's 7 good teams. You got Michigan, Miami, Florida State, Alabama, and then if whoever else you want to put in that, you put them up at the top. But everybody else was mediocre. They were not the schedules were pretty barren. But now I think that there's this middle tier of college football that is so much better than it's ever been, where you can watch a Houston play Memphis, and that game's actually entertaining. And that game has never been entertaining.
Yeah,
that's the thing for me, is that I think college football is transformed in that you can turn on just about any game and see a good team that's well coached. Because I think the coaching is better than ever, the money is better than ever, and the athletes are getting better. And so that's my point, is that Ole Miss never gets a top 5 recruiting class, but 3 years ago they got one, and they've had top 10 recruiting class since then. So a team like Ole Miss that has never had an advantage over a team like Georgia is now building a program that may not be able to compete long-term with Alabama, but that can at least beat them on a 1-to-1 basis in the middle at the beginning of the season. And that's just never happened. So that's what I'm saying, and that there is a dynasty being built, but I don't think it makes college football less interesting.
I think the evolution of the spread offense is responsible for that spread in power as well. Because when you think about it, think about how many athletes there are in the country. There are far more athletes in the country than there are people who can take a 3-step drop and bomb at 75 yards.
That's true.
There are way more athletes in the country who can just flat out burn and then lift weights and get strong and then get coached well for football. So, I mean, when coaches are figuring out how to integrate them, so then you get a good coach, you get a guy, even like Hugh Freeze, or you get the guy at Texas A&M, Kevin Sumlin.
Mm-hmm.
And neither one of those programs were historically great. They were in good conferences. I think they had maybe not horrible years in the past, but then all of a sudden you get in both of those the last few years, they had Johnny Manziel at A&M and then Chad Kelly at Ole Miss are athletic guys. Those are guys who 10, 15 years ago, I remember as a kid, the only guy who can be compared is Eric Crouch from Nebraska, I think.
Yeah.
And you get Vince Young was kind of like a once-in-a-lifetime, who is this guy who drops back and then runs? And then all of a sudden the floodgates open. And so I honestly think, Josh, to your point, that could be the death of Alabama. And you saw the 2 teams, the team that beat Alabama and then the team that played them in the national championship, Clemson. I think that was their 2 toughest games. They both had athletic quarterbacks that had the ability to run. They were athletic and they could move out of the pocket. Because if you just line up and try to smash mouth Alabama, obviously Michigan State will tell you you're going to lose 38-0. But I really do think the downfall of Alabama is going to be, unless they can adapt to that spread offense and spread defense, which they might be able to pretty well. I mean, they did beat Clemson, but the more that begins to happen, I think you could see Alabama get weakened just by the sheer fact that so many other teams have recruited such great athletes.
Yeah, that definitely could be. The only problem is that while a lot of teams try to do that, there are very few that can actually do it as well as Ole Miss and Clemson did against a team like Alabama.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. And the thing that Alabama has, why they can compete against those teams, because, I mean, it took – even though Ole Miss was up 20 twice in that game, I mean, Alabama came back. They had a chance to win the game. And the thing about them, why they can hang with teams – like Ole Miss had to get lucky to win that game. Like there were two plays, the deflection to the long touchdown, and then a play where there probably should have been a penalty called on the offensive lineman being downfield. Those were both long touchdowns. But because Alabama is so deep, you can run that offense where you're hurrying up and you rush them and you don't let any guys get off the field. But, man, they take out a 5-star athlete and they put in a freshman that's a 5-star athlete. Not that a 5-star instantly means they're going to be good, but generally that means that physically at least they are capable of outplaying a 3-star athlete. And so, I mean, that's the biggest thing, is that's what they have that can compete with anybody. And teams like Ole Miss, Houston, Oregon, teams like that are now they're getting more depth. Tennessee has built some depth. They haven't been good per se, but they're in a place now where they can compete next year. So Alabama has that depth. That is what that's what puts them above everybody. Is that they take out, like you said, Jonny, you take out Eddie Lacy and then you put in Kenyon Drake, and then Derrick Henry. So it's just it's absurd what they can do.
All right, so the first game on the docket is the Patriots versus the Chiefs. I believe it's a 4:30 kickoff, as Jonny mentioned. And the reason that this game is probably so interesting is that if you look on the other side of the AFC bracket with the Broncos and the Steelers, I kind of hate both of those teams because number one, Ben Roethlisberger's hurt, Antonio Brown is out, and two, Peyton Manning sucks, and so does Brock Osweiler. So I feel like both of those teams are kind of lame duck teams, but they're both playing each other. The two teams that are probably the most dangerous in the AFC are playing each other today, and that is the Patriots and the Chiefs. I believe the Chiefs are on some ridiculous winning streak, and then the Patriots are kind of getting healthy. So that game will probably be the most interesting out of the two, and perhaps the winner of that game is probably going to the Super Bowl.
Winner of Chiefs and Patriots is going to the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I could agree with you. I don't see Peyton Manning being strong enough to go to the Super Bowl and carry that team, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it would take – the Steelers are so injured right now, like Antonio Brown's not even playing. So I could see the Broncos defense lifting them to win against the Steelers tomorrow at 4 or 4:40. So I could see, the Broncos beating the Steelers. But it's just – I don't know. The Patriots are so injured too. But if they have Gronk, I think the Patriots make it past them. I think the Patriots are in the Super Bowl. I don't know. The Chiefs, the thing, and I know that Bill Simmons laughs about it, jokes about it, but it's true that Andy Reid is not a reliable coach ever. And so this game against the Patriots, it's like I want to believe the Chiefs can do it. I like Alex Smith. That's a pretty likable team, but man, I just don't trust Andy Reid.
So let's talk about these NFL playoffs this way. What's the Super Bowl matchup that you want to see?
Well, I guess starting with me, I would say Patriots against Cardinals. Of course, the NFL probably wants to see Patriots against Panthers.
See, I'm torn between the most compelling one is a rematch, Patriots-Seahawks.
Yes, that's true.
That's the most compelling one to me. But based on like who the best team is, I want to see Cardinals-Patriots because the Cardinals are – they're the best coached team in the NFL, maybe other than the Patriots. And they're like, I don't know, they're just so phenomenal the way they've managed to get where they've been the last 2 seasons, despite injuries and despite playing in the toughest division in football. They're a great team. So I would love to see them play the Patriots. But based on like drama and narrative, Seahawks, Patriots is probably number one.
Yeah, I think I most want to see Pats and Panthers because it's the team that's killed everyone the last 13, 14 years in the Pats. And then also this new Panthers team that growing up, the Panthers were always a guaranteed win. And then all of a sudden the last couple of years, they've been good. So I think that's kind of a handing the torch off type of matchup. But honestly, the best matchup of the playoffs might be the Cardinals and the Panthers next week or in the next round. That might be the best game of the playoffs.
The NFC Championship game, whoever it ends up being, because I'm assuming, I think we're all assuming that the Cardinals win tonight. But if they play,
let's hope they do, man. I don't want the Packers to win.
Yeah, me neither. They're just, I can't really stand Aaron Rodgers, even though I know he's great. But the Seahawks have been playing, that there's the hottest team in the playoffs theory. Right now, they're the hottest team in the playoffs, and like they're playing insanely well. And so them versus the Panthers is like to me, a sub Super Bowl, and then you get to the NFC Championship game, which is, might as well be the Super Bowl. Cardinals, Seahawks, or Cardinals, Panthers. It's going to be phenomenal.
Right, but then you have the Pats, who are the Alabama football of the NFL.
True.
That are always in the running. That Tom Brady's somehow always good. So you can really never guarantee that you're going to beat the Pats, even if they are injured. That's what Bill Simmons has talked about every week for the last 5 weeks. Who is Tom Brady throwing to? I don't even know their names.
Yeah.
And they've been saving Gronk up the last few weeks. Haven't really thrown to him that much. So who knows? I think it's going to be good, though. I'm excited.
Yeah, that's all I really care about talking about the NFL. Do you guys have any college football takes you want to throw at us?
Well, so we talked a little bit about the way it's changed in like the Alabama dynasty, and Jonny mentioned like spread offenses and how that's changed the Alabama dynasty. Because I think if you don't have that, Alabama might have just won like 7 in a row. You just don't know and basically my point the thing I was going to throw out there is like, how insane is it that college football right now has been shaped by 3 men, if you really look at it? Or maybe I'll throw in a fourth. But Chip Kelly has changed the way offense functions. Urban Meyer has also done that. He's got his own version of the spread that he used at Florida and at Utah, even back in the day. And then the way Nick Saban has built his dynasty in recruiting, and the way his defenses function, and the way he's got coaches all over college football that are all succeeding. And I think that says enough about Nick Saban. Heck, Michigan State, their coach comes from the Alabama coaching tree. So it's just or the Nick Saban coaching tree. So that kind of thing is insane. And then the fourth person I'll throw in there, and this one is a little bit of a wild card, but Gary Patterson, because he's instituted the new 4-2-5 defense. And it's not a new defensive scheme, but it's kind of an answer to the spread. And year in and year out, TCU has had a top 25 defense. This year has been an exception to that. But man, he's taken the spread offense approach to defense the last probably 10 years. And now it's catching on. Michigan State runs the same kind of defense. Ole Miss runs the same kind of defense. So a lot of teams are copying what Gary Patterson started at TCU. So it's just interesting to me that really the way that college football has changed has stemmed from 3 guys and then, a fourth kind of. So like for you guys, do you think, Josh, you talked about how college football is less interesting, but is the transformation of college football intriguing at all? Or do you think it's all just Alabama and that's it?
It's intriguing, definitely, but I'm not really sure if it makes me want to watch it more or less. Football is going to be interesting in most cases, whether it's 20-23 or whether it's 60-65. So like the Big 12, for instance, with Baylor and TCU and all those teams that are putting up a bunch of points, that's probably just as interesting to me as an Alabama-Florida game, or, well, I'd take that back. Almost as interesting, because if it's like 3-0 like some Alabama LSU games are, that's not nearly as interesting. But it's piqued my interest a bit, that the spread offenses and like the spread defenses and all that stuff, but I'm not really sure if it's sustainable for a long period of time. Maybe it is, kind of like with the NBA, how we're seeing threes take over and how all this smart money is on 3-pointers now. Not specifically how the Warriors play, because that's not really, you can't really copy that, but specifically how more teams are taking threes more than ever because it's smarter to do so.
Like Houston, for example, for people who wouldn't know, Houston, the Rockets, their whole philosophy is they take threes and they get to the basket. They do not take mid-range twos. Mm-hmm. Like they have built their team in order to never take a mid-range, like 15-foot jump shot.
Yeah, has not worked that well, by the way, this season. And I don't know if the spread offense could be compared to that, because I don't know if it's necessarily smarter to run the spread offense. It's just kind of what teams are doing. And so in order to keep up with Baylor, you can't really just run the ball the entire game, because they might score 45 points on you and you don't really have time to run the ball the whole game.
Well, so the funny thing is they're like one of the best rushing teams in college football. So you run the ball on them, they'll run the ball on you. So. Yeah.
And so, it's semi-interesting to me, but it still hasn't probably piqued my interest more than the NBA has, or probably the NFL has more than college football. But because of the interchange of players and the reign of and the thing is, like, the power teams are kind of coming back, like Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame's decent again, Florida State's good, Florida's coming back a little bit. So that is making it more interesting to me than when the smaller teams are good, which is kind of weird, because it makes sense that you kind of enjoy the Cinderella team. But for whatever reason in college football, I'm just more interested when the bigger teams are better than the smaller teams like TCU and Boise State.
Yeah. I think these teams that put up 60 points a game, like Oregon did a few years ago, like Baylor and TCU were doing, and like Boise State did, we forget about them. Remember when they were 12-0 every year and they said they should be in the championship, and everybody was like, no, you shouldn't be. And they go, and who they beat Oklahoma that one year?
Yep.
In the Fiesta Bowl, I think.
Yeah.
So when you have teams like that, to me, yeah, it was. To me, those teams remind me of my childhood watching the NBA. All that ever happened, I feel like, was offense. And defense was almost like, oh, yeah, we've got a team out there. Let's get 11. Like they recruited a bunch of receivers and fast guys and then guys who weighed over 300 pounds. And then they were like, okay, which one of you are not the best offensive people? Go play defense. So, but that's how it was. I don't think that's how it is anymore because, like you pointed out, LP, TCU's got a great defense. And so, I mean, it's interesting because you talk about the shift in the way offenses run, the shift in the way defenses run. But then you look at a conference, and I don't want to get into this discussion. I think it's a dumb discussion because conferences, I don't know, conferences don't play football games. Teams play football games. But the SEC historically is a deep conference. They have lots of good teams. They have lots of good players. But when you look at them, you don't see as much of that new style of football. You see a lot of old school style of football. Alabama, you see LSU, you see Georgia. They don't really run a lot of that spread kind of stuff. Florida did it, and I guess still kind of does, but they did it with Urban Meyer, and Ole Miss is kind of changing things up a little bit. But historically, the SEC's been maybe a more traditional, I guess you could call it, football conference. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it, and it brings up something that I wanted to bring up too. Bill Simmons talked about it yesterday. He's like, you grow up watching football, and when someone just gets laid out or knocked out or injured, your first statement and thought is, well, come on, you got to suck it up and get back out there. And he was talking about it in the context of Steelers fans wanting Antonio Brown to get back out there, wanting D'Angelo Williams. Hey, come on, just get back out there. You got to just go play. It's one of their best players, a game changer, just go play. But with the advance in medicine, people are sitting at home going, just get back in the game. Oh, wait, concussion? Like, I guess he's got to think about his future and his kids and his brain. He can't do that anymore. You can't just – these are human beings. So I don't know. I'm conflicted in that way too. Like I remember getting concussions. Like I remember that happening. I remember not remembering games, and on the way home from games having to ask my dad, like, yeah, so what happened? Like, did we win or lose? And that was on the way home. We just got done playing. And so I think that is when you humanize football players – that's definitely an aspect of it, I think, that I have been thinking about a lot the last few days. And I guess over the season too. I'm excited to see, hopefully, college football get to a place where the spread teams will compete with the pro teams, the pro style teams or the traditional style teams, and neither team feel like they have to change their style. Like I want teams just to own it. Like I want Michigan State just to own the fact that they're going to run this old school style offense in Alabama and Georgia. Like I just want them to own that. And I love that that people are still recruiting. Georgia just recruited a pro style 6'5", 220, lanky, probably can't run very well quarterback.
Yeah.
It was like, no, this is going to live on, And so it excites me. I think Cam Newton's the exception in the NFL. I definitely don't think we're going to see this onslaught of freak athlete LeBron James quarterback types. And I think that's going to still influence the way people are recruited because ultimately kids love to go to college. They want to play at their favorite college, but they're also looking at the next level. And when they look at the next level and see the NFL, these guys are colleges and even kids are going to go, man, I can't make it to the NFL if I'm 5'10" and run a 4.3 and play quarterback. It's just not going to happen. Now in college, I might throw for 4,000 yards and run for 1,000. But I'm not going to make it in the NFL doing that. So I think it's gonna draw players who could be a great quarterback in college, could draw them to different positions just by the opportunity to play at the next level.
Yeah, and to go along with that, like I think you're right in that I'm hopeful for the same thing that you're hopeful for. Like the thing about the way that teams do their different styles is like you have to do those things with the mindset of like, this is what we have, so we have to do it this way. Not to say, okay, we're going to do a spread offense because it works for other teams. Like the most ideal thing I would say is like, oh, we don't have the athletes that Alabama has, so we have to run a spread offense because that's the only way we can compete with a team like Alabama. Because I think that's the way to do it. Because I don't know, you look at a team like the Hawks, and a lot of people look at the Hawks and think the Hawks in the NBA, like they're running a system and like, oh, it's all about the system. It's about the system. Like, yes, it's about the system, but they run the system because of the athletes that they have. And that's what they stick to. They say we run this because we don't have a LeBron James. We don't have a a Blake Griffin or a Anthony Davis. Like, we run this offense because everybody has to be a piece. Where a team like the Cavs can do an ISO play where LeBron takes over and takes somebody to the hole, because he can do that. And it's the same thing in college football, which I hope that teams really own that and think that way. Like, Ole Miss just recruited. I mean, the way that Georgia recruited a pro style, Ole Miss just recruited a dual threat quarterback that's like basically Chad Kelly 2.0. And he's right. I think he's like the number 2 quarterback right behind, or they've gone back and forth being 1 and 2, him and Jacob Eason.
Yeah.
And so it's cool to see, like, teams find their identity. Let's stick to an identity. And then because that's really when college football is at its best, is when teams build around their identity and they build good athletes around that. Not just don't do the triple option where you're putting 2-star athletes in there just because they fit the mold of what you want to do.
Yeah.
Paul
Johnson, Georgia Tech.
Paul Johnson, gosh, come on. But yeah, I think
should be a rule against running the wing tee in the FBS. If you are on the wing tee, you are immediately downgraded to the FCS, and you have to play North Dakota State.
It's 2015 or 2016. Like, we should not be doing that.
Our running backs aren't 5'5", 150 pounds anymore. Like, we have genetic freaks. Let them do their thing.
Yeah.
But somehow 2 of the best receivers in the NFL came from Georgia Tech in the last 10 years. So Demarius Thomas and Calvin Johnson. How that happens is mind-blowing.
I'm with you on that. I don't know how that even happened.
I think college football, the appeal for me is that people on the field still have something to lose. In the NFL, technically, they could lose their jobs, and I get it's a career. But at the end of the day, those guys get a paycheck. And there are guys on the field in college football who know, even some of the best players, who know I'm not playing at the next level.
Yep.
And it's that drive of this could be the last time ever, or this could be my last season ever, and then I'm going to go sell insurance and be a dad and go live in the burbs somewhere. It's that makes it so incredible. To me, I like that.
Yeah, I like it too. And now that all of us are college age or just past college. And so it's really cool to kind of see like your peers playing football, because it's never been the case. I've always looked up to these guys, but now you're looking kind of down on them as they're younger than you. And so it's so interesting to me just to see it like that and to realize like, wow, these are just normal guys. Like you said, half these guys are selling insurance next year. I think part of that, like you talked about some of these athletes who are playing quarterback. I would almost disagree that I think the spread offense makes it so they can play quarterback in college and then transition. Like you look at something like Braxton Miller. He was a Heisman candidate 3 years ago. Blows out his leg? He blew out like his knee.
Yeah, I think so.
This is the season. Comes back, plays H-back for the Ohio State, and now he's going to be an NFL receiver prospect. Or somebody with Houston, Greg Ward, who's their star quarterback. But the dude could play receiver at the next level. So he can play quarterback and lead Houston to a 10 or 11, 12-win season next year. And then, if he shows the athleticism, he can transition to be a quarterback or transition to be a wide receiver at the next level. So I would like to see, I guess, guys kind of be self-aware enough to realize like someone like Russell Wilson is an outlier. Like someone like Drew Brees is an outlier. Cam Newton is an outlier. Like we had that season where RG3, Cam Newton, and Kaepernick were all going off, and we thought this is the future of football. It's like, yeah. Not really. Obviously, 2 years later, only 2 dual threat quarterbacks really exist. And then Ryan Tannehill, I guess, is kind of a dual threat guy. So yeah, I guess that's my point. I don't know where I was going with that.
I think physically, Tom Brady is the rule. Like, not big, not tiny. He's like, what is he, like 6'3" or 6'4", maybe?
Yeah.
Is he even that big? Yeah, I mean, if I have a kid, I'm not showing him highlights of Newton or Breeze or Russell Wilson. I'm showing him Tom Brady, and I'm like, look, you need to be like this guy.
Yep.
But anyways, football laying to rest. Man, I guess next time, guys, what are we going to run, a baseball pod?
Nope, that'll be by yourself. Maybe talking. How about this? You can invite like a 70-year-old guy. Like have your grandfather on, and you guys can talk Braves baseball.
Too much strategy for you guys.
I'll talk some stickball.
Okay. Hold
on. The strategy thing, I know there's strategy involved, but none of these guys
don't get into this. No.
None of these guys are college grads.
No sport is more meticulous than baseball. That's the end of that.
Stop.
Hold on, I disagree. I think football is more meticulous. Everybody's got to move in sync. It takes a week.
Football, that's pretty hard.
It takes a week to plan for every game. You can't just go into a game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean, but none of that is more meticulous. I'm not saying harder. I'm saying meticulous than getting back-to-back pitches, one being 98 miles an hour and the other being 80-mile-an-hour curve.
Well, that's more difficult. I don't know if it's more meticulous.
I'm saying like meticulous swing. I mean, I guess you could say golf is more meticulous because if your hands are off an inch, then your ball's going 100 yards to the right.
Oh, so you're saying like the margin of error.
Yeah, I'm saying like if you're meticulously detailed wrong, then you're wildly off.
Yeah, based on technical skill, there is no sport more difficult than baseball.
That's true.
But I was thinking, why in the rest of the world, and I don't know how big it is, but from what I hear, cricket is like a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I've never been able to play cricket.
I mean, I haven't either, but I'm just comparing it like why in these other countries is cricket as big as it is, but in America, baseball is like you wrote early, like months ago, Josh, like it's waning. It's definitely not exploding.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting
to me.
Yeah, because like let's say here, like basketball was invented here, and basketball is a huge sport here, but basketball is also huge all over the world. Like China is the biggest population of Kobe Bryant fans anywhere in the world. So like that's just a weird thing how like basketball has transcended nations and nationality. Soccer is popular everywhere. It's probably least popular in the US, even though we have our own league and people are getting more into it. So yeah, it is weird how like cricket has not transitioned to the US and baseball hasn't really made it into countries like India,
right?
And like Asian countries and some like even some European countries. So that is.
And cricket matches last days. I don't know if you've ever read about this. They last days.
Do they really?
Like 2 or 3 days.
That's the craziest thing to me.
Like you'll play like 6 or 7 hours and then you'll go to bed and then you'll come back and you'll play like 6 or 7 more hours. There are 2 different kinds of games and one lasts a week and one lasts like 2 or 3 days.
Wow.
That's what I'm sitting here going, okay, you're saying 3 hours is too long. Try 40.
Yeah, and that's where I disagree. Like, I think I wrote about it, but I disagree with the length of game theory as to like, I know we're getting on a tangent here, but like the length of game thing, I don't think that affects baseball's popularity because people will sit down and watch a 5-hour NFL game. Like, if a game goes to overtime in football, most people are excited, you know, like, so I don't think length is the issue.
I understand that. And we can totally do a deep dive on this some other time, why baseball is going down the rabbit hole. Yeah, exactly. So I guess we got to give a shout out to our sponsors, Nathan.
Yeah, we got the gosh, I almost want to call it the terrible name I made up for it, but the Exxon Mobil Hop-In off of Trickham Road in Arnold Mill. That is our unofficial name sponsor of the Unprofessionals podcast. Chick-fil-A Sweet Tea, shout out. You are as sweet as ever. And also brought to you by Zoom Meeting.
And we got a new sponsor this week, 20 the 9 Ministries. Hashtag B squared. And Man the Dog Brisket. We're shouting out to you guys. So thanks for that. Thanks for that new sponsor.
And on that note, thank you for listening to the Unprofessionals podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. You can check us out on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Unprofession. And you can look for us online at our website, unprofession.com, as well as SoundCloud and the podcast store on iTunes. Search The Unprofessionals, and you will find our podcast. So thanks for listening. We hope you guys enjoy the football this weekend, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.